right. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Thank you for joining us today for today's Getting to Know Japan webinar. So hello everyone. We still got a few people I see that are kind of joining in. But yes, so welcome to the today's Getting to Know Japan. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Mazziata, the activities coordinator here at YCAPS. Stepping in today for our usual host and program director of the series, Amani Kidd, who's behind the scenes today, making sure everything's working well, like setting up our nice intro video and things like that. But besides myself and Amani, today we are also joined by Mr. Lance Gatling, who will be presenting today an introduction to judo. So a little bit about Mr. Gatling. He founded the Kanō Chronicles, which is www.kanochronicles.com, a history of modern Japan and martial arts through the life and times of judo's founder, Kanō Jigorō. And please correct the pronunciation on that later if I was off, sir. So a little bit more about Mr. Gatling. He retired as a U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel after serving as a Northeast Asia Foreign Area Officer, Operations Planner, and as a U.S. State Department Foreign Service Officer as well. His Nexial Research, a Tokyo-based consultancy, served the defense, space, and government sectors. In over 4 decades in Japan and Asia, he held senior roles in top U.S. aerospace, defense, and IT companies, technology programs ranging from ammunition to robots to spacecraft. And yet, he also knows quite a bit about judo. He holds degrees from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, West Kentucky University, and the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. Only foreign member of the Japan Space Agency Satellite Utilization Advisory Committee, founding board member of the Ministry of Education Technology Education Initiative, and importantly for today, is a first foreign board member of the Tokyo Judo Federation, Japan's largest. Member of Japanese Academy of Martial Arts as well, and director instructor at the U.S. Embassy Tokyo Judo Dojo. So quite an illustrious person we have joining us today as a speaker with a litany of accomplishments, both career and personal. So we're very grateful to have him joining us today to talk to us about the history of judo and teach us a little bit about judo. A small note for those of you in the Tokyo area, we'll get to it later after the event as well, but we actually do have a in-person event coming up on May 17th, this coming weekend, where Mr. Gatling will be giving us a kind of personalized tour and commentary of a judo event happening in Tokyo. So if you are in the Tokyo area, check our website and join us for that this coming weekend. One other small note, just a kind reminder to everyone to please refrain from turning on your microphones. Please keep your microphones on mute today during the seminar, so that way we don't have any hot mic moments or any interruptions during the presentation today. And that's all I've got. So with that being said, I'm going to turn things over to our guest today, Mr. Gatling, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And here we go. A short introduction to judo in 30 minutes or less, which is a daunting task. Kanō Jigorō invented judo, and he claims in 1882. It wasn't quite true, but that's the way it goes. But he didn't create this in a vacuum. He fused Chinese military and Taoist insights that flexibility and direction defeat brute force with the Confucian ethics of benevolence and reciprocity, and then overlaid that with the liberal utilitarian dyads of altruism and egoism from Spencer and Mill, which are very popular in Japan at the time, combined with the German Wilhelm Ostwald's energetics, which has lost currency today. He and his senior judo students experimented with biomechanics and introduced sports and general health weight training to Japan, amongst other training methods. Confucian and Taoist concepts structured Kanō's judo. Even its formal name, Nihon Den Kodokan Judo, the way of flexibility from the traditional Japanese hall for teaching the way, enacts the ancient Confucian admonition, Onko Chishin, which means to study the old, to know the new. Here he's making the explicit point that judo is not simply jujitsu, dressed up in modern fashion, but a disciplined Confucian rereading of the classical principle of flexibility. Yielding overcomes hardness. recast for a nation state that needed rational physical education, moral training, and physical and mental preparedness for national emergencies, including military service. And he was selling judo to his initial audience, the kazoku, the former court nobility and daimyo parents of his students at the Gakushuin, the peers school, most of who were trained in the Chinese classics and would know what Kanō was referring to. By 1913, Kanō has written a book called Judo Gai Setsu, an outline of judo. And in that, he lists all of these things. What makes up the composition of judo as a complete system, kata, which are forms, and randori, which is like a laboratory, an open laboratory of unscripted, not competition, but practice. Kogo, mondis, which are lectures and question and answers, nagekomi, throwing, pinning, and pinning includes choking and joint submissions, and atemi, the striking techniques. So there are four aspects to this that Kanō saw, and he did these in parallel with two different tracks in his own school: physical education, contest, combat, self-cultivation, and recreation. And this is how the judo outline even works today. But in the old days, jujitsu was not about having a philosophy. It was not about training people to do things for the good of society. It was all about winning. This is Hokusai, the famous woodblock artist in circa 1815, and he's showing jujitsu as he saw it, which is remarkably well done. But in each one of these manga, this is a series of manga that he had printed in a multiple volume set. You show that the person, uke, the person being acted upon, is resisting to the most of their ability, and in doing so, they're brought to their own destruction rather than blending with the opponent's force and creating an opposite action. So let's see what that means. This is Kanō Jigorō. One of the marvelous things about studying judo in Kanō is that modern photography and even video is available. And we've recently found a recording of him. Here he is at a Japanese university explaining the off-balancing that is key to judo. That his partner is a gentleman named Yamashita Yoshitsugu, who is his favorite partner. Kanō actually gave him a block of land next to his own house, and they lived together in Bunkyoku for many, many years. I wrote that judo includes performative arts, almost like a ballet. This is called Juno Kata. This is developed by Kanō in his 20s to explain how, rather than forcing against someone, you move with their force. Here's uke is being pushed over, and rather than fight it, he swirls and takes the energy from his opponent to use it to the opponent's demise. So there are 100 basic techniques in judo. And here's a demonstration of many of them to throw. And each time you see that the opponent either lands on his side or on his back. And this is opposed to jujitsu. If you recall in the jujitsu video we watched, the opponent's face down, and that's so that the tori, the person doing the control and throw, can control them from the back and mount them if necessary, or in the event of battlefield combat, can incapacitate or kill them from behind. In judo, they made the decision that the throws are symbolic of that destruction, but not actually hurting the person. You can do this all day long at speed with a trained partner, and that's part of the practice. Okay, here's a quick guide to modern judo. This is Neil Adams, who is a very high-ranking European judoka and a member of the International Judo Federation. He's going to explain modern judo. Let's get back to this later. So judo made some inroads into the elite schools of Japan, and with Kanō was an education administrator, a senior official for the Ministry of Education. He ended up being the head of the Tokyo Higher Normal School, but that was later in life. Early on, he was getting interested students scattered around and selling to primarily to the elites of Japan. But the Japanese wars don't create judo or kendo, but they strengthen the climate in which the Japanese were willing to participate in disciplined martial education systems. Popularity soared during these times. After decades in essentially only in the top modern schools, martial arts started to gain prestige throughout the culture as a disciplined body culture and national preparedness. So Kano was actually dispatched to the battlefields of the Russo-Japanese War on a secret mission for the prime minister. And he came back, and one of the things that he did was to make some of the judoka, his judo students that had been killed in the war, turn them into national heroes and literally into Shinto war gods. And they stayed that way for the entire period. There are still people today that hold these men in great deal of respect for their judo activities and for their patriotism and their sacrifices. They are all in Yasukuni Shrine today, enshrined there. So he explicitly starts to link judo to national strength and strategy, even as he frames it as education first. So this is a way for even a farmer's son to be a loyal, sacrificial imperial subject, a modern samurai capable and prepared to contribute to the empire. And at one point, he actually, not for public consumption, but he equates the correct imperial subject equal to the old gods of Japan. So he helps to define what it means to be Japanese through Bushido, Budo, Judo, and he was a great supporter of Kendo in the recognition that not everyone wanted to do a grappling martial art. He had a great deal of respect and impact on Kendo also. So in 1911, the school law was amended to add judo and kendo for middle school and above. The Tokyo Higher Normal School, where Kano has now been the head for almost 20 years, is provides most of the specialized physical education instructors who provide judo instruction throughout this small number of schools in the empire that actually do provide judo instruction as part of the core school curriculum. He had introduced it earlier as club sport, and he actually sort of invented the use of school facilities after hours in what today is called bugai. And there are millions and tens of millions of people in Japan who participate in bugai activities using school facilities. That was created by Kano too. But this is a threshold where Kano begins to lose direct control over judo and it becomes a state certified training with standardized content. And particularly it's coded down. It's in the vernacular, you would say it was dumbed down in order to teach much younger people than Kano had originally envisioned. So the good news was that he got it into the school system as he had intended to for many, many years. And the bad news was that it was in fact going to be much out of his control and outside the control of the Kodokan network. So why did judo spread so rapidly? In the late Meiji era, the country needed physical education. They needed something that was inexpensive, it was disciplined, they could use teacher training to promulgate this, and also the notion of nation building. It was still very important to the Japanese and even more important in the aftermath of the three wars that Japan had participated in by then. So judo provided a portable, low-cost, scalable system that could be moved around relatively inexpensively. You needed a room, some mats, and an instructor. People typically showed up in homemade judo gi that cost next to nothing to make. So it became scientific physical education, moral cultivation, and a national pedagogy all at once. So it spread quickly throughout the schools, police, military, the colonies overseas like Brazil and the United States, and in Korea, and in occupied portions of China where the Japanese had substantial population. And in Taiwan, there were martial arts hall built for Judo and Kendo. In 1922, Kanō formulates the final version of his judo philosophies. He'd worked on this for many decades, but it came down to these final words, and he pared it down over time. They started fairly long, complicated, and he boiled it down to a shorthand, sort of, in the Yonjujiko, the typical Asian four-character reference, Seiryoku Zenryo Jita Kyoe, the best use of energy and mutual benefit. They're two separate sayings, but they do work together. So this is an admonition to use the best possible efficient conversion of physical and mental energy in every situation in which that is appropriate. Not all are appropriate, but that every bout, every judo competition, every grappling should cultivate character through cooperation with the person, even as you try to defeat them. In this way, judo becomes an embodied technology in which Confucian self-cultivation, Taoist yielding, and Western scientific utilitarian notions of energy and social welfare are drilled into the body through regular, intense practice called shugyo. So Kanō's aims remain constant throughout his lifetime, and that's to maintain this utilitarian efficiency and jita kyoe altruism versus the egoism of an independent actor. But in the 1930s, in what's called the Showa recovery, the Showa revolution, the military mobilization, martial symbolism, and ultranationalism show up, and judo is not immune to this pressure. So Kanō's language of maximum efficiency and mutual welfare and benefit increasingly come under criticism in a political climate hungry for combat readiness, loyalty, and sacrifice. And it's called antiquated utilitarianism when the correct politically correct keyword of the day is the imperial way. Individual effort and responsibility based on universal truths clashed with the collective mass training and loyalty to the emperor. So judo uniforms and techniques could be used as education or adopted as pre-military drill for young students, and that capability was eventually systematically exploited by the state, the Imperial Army, and Japan's militarists. Kanō died in 1938 as judo is being drugged full into wartime mobilization. His nephew, a combat marine named Admiral Nango Jiro, who's a marvelous character, we'd have to invent him if he didn't exist already. He takes over the Kodokan, and he is very, very different from Kanō in many ways, and he's sort of hidden from judo histories. Only now are they starting to officially recognize his contributions to judo, as it was so controversial in the post-war period. But in 1942, the Home Ministry took over all of Budo from the Ministry of Education, and the Kodokan itself joins the totalitarian uniparty called the Imperial Rule Assistance Association. This is with Prime Minister Konoe, who was actually a close confidant of Kanō Jigorō, who was a close friend of Konoe's father. After Japan is defeated, GHQ bans Budo in schools and public facilities as part of the demilitarization of Japan. Judo is not a race, but it has to shed its wartime coding. The Kodokan responds with sport judo. In the 1950s, club sports are allowed again after school in Japan. Kendo is never allowed back into the schools during the occupation. 1951, in an incredible act of reconciliation, the Western countries that founded the International Judo Federation before Japan joined even were in fact an independent organization, but they nominated and elected Kanō Rise, Kanō's second oldest son. He became the new Kodokan president post-war. They make him the International Judo Federation president. I think this is a remarkable act in which the primary countries, and they were Western Europe plus the United States at this time, had lost collectively 9 million people in the war that Japan played a huge role in. And in this act of reconciliation, they brought the Kanō family and Japan back into the mainstream, at least the titular heads of judo worldwide. And he stayed there for 13 years as the International Judo Federation built out. Judo started primarily overseas in Europe and the Americas, later Asia, Africa. In 1940, Kanō had helped in the 1930s. Kanō had set up the strategy in which the Japanese International Olympic Committee appealed to and got the support of Mussolini for Rome to drop out of the competition to hold the 1940 Olympics. But they were canceled because of the pressure of the war and also the fears that China would be able to convince many of the Western powers to boycott Japan. It would be a huge disaster, political disaster, as they lost face when no one showed up to the 1940 Tokyo Olympics. Judo was planned as a demonstration sport as a counter to what the Chinese had done in Berlin, which is a fantastic martial arts demonstration that doesn't get any press today. 1964, the Tokyo Games, judo is a demonstration sport. It's not a full-fledged sport, but it's very famous in that the Japanese were ecstatic. It was live TV. TV sales went through the roof as people um, could actually watch TV and see the homeboys win three of the weight classes. In the open class, they were shocked that the giant Dutchman, Anton Giesing, actually won the open class bout. And he, at first, the Japanese were shocked. He became a national hero in Japan because he was very demure, very appropriate for judo behavior. We'll see some bad examples here in a moment. And he died a national hero here as an international judo ambassador. By 1972, judo is a permanent Olympic sport. That sportification changes the rules. The Western mindset in which if you think that the International Judo Federation has over 200 members, national members and regional members in it, and Japan is just one vote amongst that. Certainly Japan's opinion early years carried a lot of weight, but now there are people who think that they know more about judo than the Japanese do, and in the world of sport judo, it may well be the case. But there are tens of millions of judo practitioners worldwide. It's the most popular combat sport in history, and the spread has been fantastic. In some countries, the participation rate is far exceeds that of Japan. France is a particular example. So today it's a mix of an Olympic sport, a school of physical education, there are communities that do Budo, families that do Budo, former military and current operators do some derivation of judo. The offshoots include Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Russian sambo, Krav Maga, no-gi wrestling, and things like that. They're all highly influenced by judo, mixed martial arts, you name it. And the question is, what remains of Kanō's judo philosophies in all of this activity and swirl around the sport post-war in post-war judo? So we go back to Kanō's 1913 Judo Gaisetsu as a blueprint. So through invention, becoming a national system distorted by the war and the sportification, now a global practice with multiple layers, multiple levels of judo, highly biased towards competitive sport. What was lost? What remains of Kanō's system? But it's pretty astonishing to think that a 20-year-old thought this out and achieved this to rename jujitsu, redesign it, institutionalize it, have it survive. And he had planned for it to survive his death through the institution of the Kodokan, which he set up as a foundation in Japan, and to globalize, which he was approaching carefully, but it actually got out of his control soon enough. So what we see now is it is education, fitness, and competition, what I call competitive combat. And it appeals in so many different levels to different people for different reasons. But also the Japanese have a great recognition that it's a part of Japanese soft power, that the Japanese government has officially dispatched judo instructors around the world, mostly to third world countries that in where judo doesn't exist, and they are seeding judo throughout the world in addition to all the other infrastructure activities they have in Africa or Southeast Asia um, or 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 South Asia. They'll send judo instructors out, and wherever they go, it takes root and continues to grow into uh, the thing that we see today. So I'd like to finish with some um, just a note that what his genius was his civilizational design. He set this in motion, adjusted as he went, and came into something that was unique and still today reverberates through many different ways. Okay, so this is back to the International Judo Federation introduction of what is judo, and I'll stop it, and I'll there's no sound to it. I'll do the voiceover. So if you watch, there are 100 recognized techniques, about 67 of them standing techniques. The objective is to sweep your opponent, sweep or throw them, pick them up, drop them, in controlled fashion so that they land on their back. The old days it was across the shoulders, both points of the shoulders down on the back with authority, and you stay and keep your control. You keep yourself in correct posture. Okay, so here this guy lands on his side, and I'm sure there's some judo experts in the audience who might disagree with me on some of this. I would give him like waza ari, a half point for this. He lands on his side, not on his back, and this man is working with him to demonstrate this properly. But he's also controlling his own body, and is capable of doing astonishing things to keep from losing. Neil Adams again. Thank you, Mr. Neal. This is one of the young Japanese ladies. She's a semi-pro. She works for Token, the construction company, which sponsors a semi-pro team. There are multiple levels of Japanese semi-professional judo players. They play usually for 10 years, and then they have to go back into the company. They're offered jobs, or they have to go out in the cruel world and go do something else, teach judo or have a job someplace else. But they train them very well. Okay, so here you go. You see, she turned the person through them on the back. This is pretty clearly Ippon. Now these are combinations as as Tori attacks Uke and is trying to get him into position off balance. If you can see, Uke is now off balance. And Tori, if he can respond correctly, keeps his posture, he can attack Uke in blue in many different ways to throw him. So turning your back on your opponent is a very dangerous thing. It takes time. It's fast, and judo rewards the attacker. How do you win? Ippon is, as I said, a strong throw onto the back, and watch the referee. Okay, that's a very clear win there. Okay, so in this instance, you saw that I believe he's Russian, the Russian in blue tried to attack, and then Takato, the Japanese player, counterattacked and took him to his back, flat on his back, both shoulders down, no question, Ippon, end of show. The other way to win is to pin somebody for a period of time. It's not, you don't get any points for getting into the position. You get you work against the clock. Now the person being held down is working against the clock trying to escape uh, before she loses. Okay, these rules have changed over time. It used to be 30 seconds. They reduced it to 20 seconds. Or you can go to a submission. In this instance, he's going for a choke. And if you watch, he the man in blue tapped out. Okay, Waza Adi, less powerful. She's landed on her side. He's landed on his side, so they agree with me. Waza Adi. That didn't go in straight down, so you get a Waza Adi in 10 seconds, and then at 20 seconds, collectively, you win. In some competitions, they go to a golden score. The first person to point any small point is a winner at the end of that competition. And then they're very complex. It's like baseball. There are a lot of rules, and sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on, frankly. It's difficult to show to children because the rules change, the standing rules change. You can get disqualified for running out of the mat, or you can get disqualified for pushing someone out of the mat. So that's up to the discretion of the referee. Um, the rules keep changing. That's direction. He's giving direction to the players. I'm going to skip ahead now, if I can do this. These are from the Paris Grand Slam, which is the start of the global professional judo competitions. They come and they're heavily seated in the region. This is Paris, so you have heavy representation of the European nations, the host nation. These are those lightweights that start early. These are some of the strongest people on the planet, pound for pound. You can see the incredible activity. Most of them are incapable of keeping this up past 28, 32-year-olds is ancient in this sport. You can see this referee, she's very famous. She's pretty generous with these folks, giving ippon when she raises her hand straight up. That means he's won. It's the end of the match. Now, she can be overridden by in the old days, they would have corner judges who would help. They would work as a team of three. But now they use videos, instant replays, and a panel of judges who can override her and advise her. I've seen this move a couple of times in the Paris Grand Slam just recently. You see the gentleman in blue offered to give a hand up. That's not traditional. Traditionally, you just step away from the person and let them stand up. If they can't stand up, then they've got a problem. You need to address it. But the gentleman who just lost waved him off and said, "No, I can do this." Okay. Let's watch just a tiny bit of this, and you can see the activity. These without their gi, and you see these men without their men and women without their tops. Ladies wear, of course, t-shirts. Men traditionally do not wear t-shirts. In Japan, you won't see if you go to our meeting, you won't see any blue gi. That's for the international competition. In Japan, they traditionally wear just white. Okay, so White, the Japanese, is behind. He's making a quick rush trying to win. At that point, look here. His leg is encumbered by Uke. So this is not a pin. No matter what his upper body does, he's not pinned because his leg is there, and the man on bottom can ride out the clock. And I think that's what he's done here. There. How's that? And let's see what the chats say.
So we've still got a few questions coming in. There's a few in the chat right now, but obviously, please feel free to leave any more questions that the audience may have in the chat. We've got a couple that we can get started with if you'd like, sir.
Okay, there's questions regarding Jeff. Jeff had a question, MMA and the multi-billion-dollar industries. Um, this is a very interesting question. There are people probably in the chat better placed than I am for this. It became a significant issue. Um, Judo today is produced to a gnat's eyebrow, as it were. There's a lot of money behind judo today, much more advertising money, whatever. And one of the things was that for better or worse, Vladimir Putin is a very accomplished judoka. He's a serious guy. He's been promoted beyond the rank he would normally be, but you can tell he's accomplished, practiced, fearless. He knows what he's doing. And he and some friends in East Europe that were associated with some interesting financial enterprises, I'll put it that way, sort of got in the leadership of the International Judo Federation. Of course, with the invasion of Ukraine, that created an incredible mess. Um, Judo people at the grassroots are terrible and I've told everybody to their face, so it's no surprise. They're terrible at recruiting. They're terrible at getting sponsors. They're not, they're typically not real business people. So there's this constant friction between we want to do things and we have no money, therefore we have to get better at getting money, but we want to do things and those things are sport judo, and it is a real issue. But everyone in MMA and every place else recognizes that judo is indispensable to their techniques. So they all learn judo techniques or techniques that are derived from judo in order to be competitive at that sport. And young men, young women who are competitive will do everything they can to remain competitive. And at this day and age, they all know enough judo to be dangerous, standing, to throw to the ground, and to learn how to do that. And that is very, very important. How we monetize that, I have no idea. Japan is the worst place. They have no business sense whatsoever. Judo matches last, depending on the age and the rules of the competition, which vary country to country. Japan kind of tries to keep more traditional, so you only see white gi, and you'll see say 4-minute matches when we go, and they'll use three judges who judge if the pair goes into the end of the match with match point with the equal number of points. The judges will determine, and they will score for the aggressor. It's almost like boxing. In boxing, each round you count the number of punches, and the judges award the match to the person who punches better more. In judo, they reward the aggressor. But in things like the Grand Slam where you're watching in Paris, you can't not have a winner, so they go into the golden score, which is a sudden death syndrome. In other places where they don't really care if there's a winner or not, they'll give a half a point to each person, and all they're doing is for the fun of it, the glory of it, and to get promoted. So they'll settle for half a point. Make sense? Kanō developed, and this is Claire Hahn. I would recommend that you check out my website where the long philosophic development of judo is laid out. It's beyond the scope of this to talk about it today. It's not closely followed in judo at large today. They recognize it's a source, but as I mentioned early in the presentation, Kanō drew from 2,000-year-old Chinese military strategies and philosophies. These actually predate Taoist thought and the Taiji, which I actually put in the chat. It predates that. It's very ancient, it's very complicated, and we can't get into it today. But thank you for the question. Well, the Moe Gyo, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, Moe Gyo. When you studied judo, did you study in Japan? The promotions are not unified in Japan in global judo. In Japan, a functioning young man, a young woman, a functioning adult can get to first degree black belt in 1 year by going 3 to 5 times a week, and a little bit of competition, learning some basic techniques. And as you say, they have to do nage no kata, the throwing technique, throwing form. They have to do 3 of the 5 sets from left and right, and then as the person throwing and the person being thrown. So 5 times 3 times 2, 15, 30, 30, that number of techniques, and they don't have to be perfect, but a first degree black belt you can get in Japan within 2 years easily for not even a highly athletic adult, just a reasonably athletic. And the Kodokan, in part of its recent recruiting practices, has a giant banner outside, so get a black belt in a year. And what they're saying is, come to us. In Japan, a first degree black belt is just someone you can throw hard and not worry about hurting. They know how to fall. That's one thing you're sure of. They know how to fall. They know how to be thrown, and um, they are ready to make further progression. But you don't have to make a lot of concessions to them as a beginner. Overseas, it might take you 7, 8, 10 years to get to that same level. Level being the black belt, not level in terms of fitness or capability, but it's just a different mindset. It's a different set. And part of that, I believe, in my history research, it shows that young U.S. military men who came to Japan and they got a brown belt in a few weeks or whatever, and they went back. And after a year or so, they started having students say, "Well, when do I get my brown belt? When do I get my black belt?" And in order to stay ahead of them, they made it kind of a death march. I mean, it was kind of there are now efforts to rationalize and bring those back together, but it's completely out of whack. So we will promote someone very quickly to first degree black belt, but then tell them when you go overseas, everyone's going to look at you funnily because that qualification in Europe might be 10 years. Or someone may never test, and they, 12 to 15 years, they'd be very good at judo, but not as a black belt holder. So I hope that makes sense. But it's a great question. Um, why did it get diluted over time? It ain't for the money because there's no money in judo for almost anybody. It's all about history and culture and a whole lot of other things. Powerhouses in Japan, powerhouses of international judo. What happened in the Olympics, particularly, was that the East Europeans and the Soviets, started realizing that they could convert wrestling programs, which they're very, very strong. Why wrestling? Because they could pump them full of steroids and make monsters out of these wrestlers. It's relatively cheap to do. You need a weight room and a mat. You don't need, bicycle trails and all sorts of complex training. You just get a guy pumped up on steroids, or get women pumped up on steroids to the point you can't tell if they're men or women. And then they realized they could pretty easily convert to judo. And when I was in Ukraine a couple of times and I went to the grassroots judo in Ukraine, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist as grassroots. There were actually sports high schools that went out and found children in the 5, 6, 7, 8 who were active and integrated in their movement, and they were actively recruited as single digit youngsters to go into schools. And if they worked hard and they could progress through the system, they get through the high school, get into the college, and have a job as a national competitor or as a physical education instructor. And this is a very good, middle class living in many of these places, and the chance to be a hero or you travel internationally, make some money. And those systems that the Soviets set up in the Eastern Bloc still exist. So you can imagine that those powerhouses are. Russia is very strong. Most of the stands have very excellent programs. They also, incidentally, have ethnic, native, domestic wrestling heritages. So if you're a Tajik and you wrestle, there's a 1,000-year-old Tajikistan culture of wrestling. The Mongolians are strong for their population. France is a perpetual standout. The United States kind of sucks. One of the reasons is there's so many different organizations in the United States. Nobody can decide who's in charge. It's been a huge mess. It fragmented after the war. In most countries, you can't get insurance. You can't get access to a dojo unless you're recognized by the National Judo Federation, which is part of the National Athletics Federation, which is part of the semi-socialist government structure. There are almost no independent judo. In the United States, there are 3 or 4 organizations, and then tons of people who don't belong to anything, and it's uncoordinated and unfunded and interesting. So, I hope that makes sense. Any other questions? Is the earning of Eric Warner, earning a black belt similar to other martial arts in Japan? Kanō Jigorō actually developed the system of having a black belt. When his first dojo, purpose-built dojo, is 40 mats. It turns out my dojo inside the U.S. Embassy is 40 mats. And when it got to where he could not glance around the room and tell that senior students were practicing with junior students as they learned and had controlled competitive combat, the randori, um, he started telling the senior students to wear dark colored sashes, holding their hakama And then their judo, keikogi, practice gi. Everybody calls it a gi incorrectly. Keikogi, practice gi. Keiko means to preserve the ancient ways. And that's what we're doing in judo every day. You're preserving the ancient ways. But the black belt came from Kanō, recognizing. Then he added these gradations, first degree, first dan, second dan, dan meaning step, and then Q was below that. So he started building downward. And one of the judo instructors in France added all the rainbow of colors. So all that Q, the down, like white belt, blue belt, yellow, green, blah, 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 up through brown and then black, and black going up and then going red and white, kohaku, red and white belt at six down and above, and then finally the top rank at 9, 10 and with a red belt, uh, more informally. All of that comes from judo. And then judo was affected by the tradition in Go, ego. Um, the tradition in Go that had a ranking system as a handicap system. So people, somebody who knows Go well would not play someone like me without a whole bunch of stones as a handicap for them. I would start the game placing a handful of stones. So that was adopted by judo, and that promulgated throughout all the other Japanese martial and the Korean martial arts. And anybody that has a colored belt, it comes from Kanō himself, who was an educator, recognized the value of motivation, particularly for young children having step. And in fact, in Japan, mostly everybody just wears white until they get black. They might be given informally the ranking, the Q, the grades up to a brown belt, but they don't bother to wear the belts. It's only in the West. Once again, when you have 10 years between starting judo and getting your black belt, you want to have some sign of progress. In Japan, since it's a relatively short time and they're also more modest, they just wear white belts. Does that make sense, Mr. Warner? How do international you how do Jeff how do the international judo federations attract young judoka? Well, part of that is highly they do have an education program. You go to the International Judo Federation, you see articles on the history of judo. I have exception with some of them. Some of them are very well written. Some of them aren't quite right. But it's highly produced, very watchable TV technology. Listen, when I started watching judo, it was is indecipherable. You couldn't tell who was doing what. The 1964 Judo Olympics, the Japanese were this close to the screen trying to figure out white on white, who's doing what. It's a wide field of vision. They can't see anything. There's no instant replay. It happens in a flash. I mean, this is so fast you can't imagine how fast it is. And TV was almost worthless. You get some grainy black and white. And now it's phenomenal. I mean, just little clips that I showed you. You look at the athleticism, the balance of these people. These are some of the best trained, best conditioned athletes in history doing this stuff for you. And if you look at it in slow motion in high resolution TV or 4G or whatever, um, 4K, sorry. If you look at it closely, it's astonishing what they do. It's like cats. I mean, you throw some guy as hard as you can and he twists in midair to land on his front. Why? He doesn't want to lose. So he twists in midair to land on his face rather than his back and lose. So part of that is the technology. They are very good at that. Part of that is the stories. I think they're missing a sure thing. I think they're missing the concern that people have about self-defense. What amazes the Japanese when you go to France and see the massive participation level of the French that participate in judo at 4 times the level of Japanese, you get retired couples who just start doing judo for what? For the culture, for the beauty of it, for the motion, for the entertainment value, whatever, which shocked Kanō. He didn't understand that people just like to watch stuff like this when it's well done. He didn't understand that at all. He thought they would do it in their little private room and nobody would come around. Turns out people that have no family involved in it want to watch it. So this is pretty amazing, right? Does that make sense? Combatives. Who asked this? Jeff. Um, There is a judo movement inside the self-defense forces. I've been there. I've recognized that they have the Akano Chutonchi Camp Akano has the aviation school and also the physical education school, and they don't support the Olympics. They do support the self-defense forces do support Olympic sports, but not judo. They have a lower level of participation in judo. It's kind of a club sport activity, but they do gather people from around. They have their own martial arts, which includes a lot of judo moves, but it's not classified, but they don't show outsiders. I've seen it worked at very interesting. The Chinese do the same thing. The Chinese have copied almost all of this stuff at one level or another. They have created Shujiao. It's supposed to be this ancient Chinese stuff. It looks a lot like a mixture of Mongolian wrestling and judo. They have their own hand-to-hand combat and everything else. So Sambo is, you take a look at Sambo is what the Russians, the Soviets thought judo plus hand-to-hand combat would look like. So yes, they do practice, but very few people practice judo as a combative technique. It's primarily a sport today. I'm sorry. Any interest in me doing? I know a lot about Ueshiba Sensei. If you look into Ueshiba Sensei of Aikido, um, it's very interesting. The people that really know this, Peter Goldsberry and down in Hiroshima, he knows everything. Look him up. Send me a note if you want to. I can link you up with stuff. You think about looking at Kanō. Ueshiba since they dropped out of middle school and had only a handful of things written about him during his lifetime. The first document I have written about Kanō Shihano, he's 17 years old. The government writes about him. They were still writing. The government was still writing about him, years after his death, and the private references. He wrote for literally for over 50 years, and then the government wrote about him. Other people, the amount of information that he put out is astonishing. So it's a very different question. Um, yes. Any other questions? I think that's fills my time. It's 10 till, according to my highly accurate American timepiece here. Any further questions? Jeff,
Mr. Gang. Yes, yes, Mr. Gatling.
if you can leave up the chat, I can answer any further questions. One of the core methods that Kanō Shihan used was if anyone had any questions, he would stay and answer questions until he determined he had to go find the answer or he answered the question. So I'm willing to sit here. If you leave the chat up, we'll just check out later. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Steve Scott asked, is there an English language copy of Kano's Judo Gaisetsu? Do you know of?
No,
There you go. That was a quick and easy one.
it it's it is a great recitation of a lot of things that Kano writes over a period of time. The importance of it is it's a capsule of when he thought that judo was going to reach its peak, and then he realized that they were losing control of judo because the Ministry of Education was taking over. That's one of the reasons he kind of codified it and said, "This is what judo really is." And then the Ministry of Education said, "Thank you very much for your input." And then they went off and did what the Ministry of Education wanted to do. Even though he was not just a high school principal, he was the number usually in the top five of the bureaucrats in the Ministry of Education for the better part of 20 years. He was either number three or number four in the Ministry of Education, but he still had a system within which he had to work. He wanted to bring judo into the education system, and in doing so, they lost control of it. And it had an impact that I don't think has ever been academically explored, where he went from a very small number of people that he personally trained were going out and proselytizing judo, and he knew them all personally, and they were sworn to fealty, as it were, loyalty and obedience to the Kodokan, to all of a sudden anybody who walked through the door could convince a local school that they could teach judo, became a judo instructor. And the quality control went off the cliff. So he starts a whole series of mechanisms to try to regain quality control, got the Ministry of Education to fund essentially like Tandai, short-term college courses for judo instructors, get former military to come in as qualified physical education instructors who could start to learn a bit of judo to go out to, because the schools had this requirement to teach judo and then they couldn't find a qualified teacher. So it was great, much greater impact on judo than people realize, I think.
Sounds like the English programs that the schools have now.
Well, of
Qualify.
course.
They have to do
No,
English
that's
teaching,
part
but
of
not.
the that's part of the history that in what you experience day to day is limited resources, different interests. Kano wanted to have people who taught judo and kendo. Let me tell you, those two don't mix.
Hmm,
If you like to grapple, if you can put up with someone's, smelly armpit on your face, kendo guys do this from a meter or two away, right? They don't grapple in kendo.
yeah.
If they wanted to grapple, they'd grapple. And it turns out that these are very different personality types, and the people who are attracted to one are seldom attracted to the other. Kano's idea was, I'm going to have people who do are everything to everybody. It turns out that those people are very few.
Hmm. And also, if you have that one overall driving interest, if you really are focused in on judo and being very good at judo, you're not going to have the time to also develop that intense ability in another martial discipline that's so different from
Correct.
judo. Now, if it was a similar discipline like wrestling or jujitsu, perhaps there could be some overlap in there. But yeah, it sounds great on paper, but in actuality, probably not
Correct.
so great, right?
It's just if someone said you're going to teach English and organic chemistry,
And science, exactly.
and you're going to do this at a very high level. I mean, if you're in America, if you're the football coach, you can teach science to grade school kids. You're not, most football coaches are, Tom Landry is not going to be teaching physics,
Hmm.
right? He's kind of focused on one thing, and it ain't physics. So some of this is, interesting. It's human nature. It's repeated time and again. Here's a program. It's like the militarists wanted to turn judo into this, hand-to-hand combat for the good of the empire. Well, how much can you do in so many hours a week in a middle school or a high school? I mean, you can write all the programs you want, but it comes down to some guy motivating some teenagers to do this stuff. And you can read people's diaries, memoirs. I have of them going, well, it was another day in judo, and I got my face crushed, and I got yelled at a lot, and I that wasn't fun. I mean, these are people who later learned to support judo, but they say at the time it wasn't taught well. The teacher wasn't very organized. I mean, it was a ritual that we went through, and I'm glad I did it, but I really don't want to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But I actually remember when I was an English teacher for a few years, I remember there was one of the blocks that the junior high school students did was judo. And we were lucky enough that there was, but the thing is not every school is going to have someone on staff or have a connection in the neighborhood that can come and give qualified instruction. But a lot of them can because judo is so
Sure.
widespread. So we had a great instructor came in and did it, and the gym teacher helped with it. He had a judo background. I was able to join in, and it was quite fun. I did wrestling in high school, so I was able to show some of the kids some high school
Yeah,
wrestling style techniques, and it was a
perfect
good time, but it
alternate.
was more for just the very basics, right? Not very high end.
Well, the leftists thought that Japan was going back over the militarist cliff when the national government said that every school system had to make Budo instruction available to children that wanted it. And they went, "Oh my God, there's who's qualified to do this? How are we going to do this? What's going to form? Next is we march on Manchuria." They went on and on and on about it. Their entire wards, coup, like Kitaku in Tokyo, it's got 400,000 people in it, Kitaku. 12 schools. There's not a single child that asked to do judo or kendo. By Japanese law, the school system must make it available if a single child asks. No one's asked in years, right? So what they have is semi-retired guys or retired guys who will come in and teach a 6-week introduction course to judo or kendo, and it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing. And I talk to guys. I did. Most of them are now passed away, but men who went through mandatory Budo training in the late Showa after Kanō died, and it became a death march. They were pounded into the ground. They were worked hard. They were, depending on who was teaching, it could be a guy whose extra job. He was a phys ed teacher and he taught judo on the side. Could have been a PTSD Imperial Army survivor of the initial attacks on Singapore or something, and these guys were damaged goods, and they were getting the little Sato-kun ready for the war, ready to go die for the emperor. So you had this entire range of the human experience there. Somebody doing it to make a paycheck, and somebody doing it to go die for the emperor. Like you can't legislate all of that, and you can't practice. Uh, you can't bypass human nature.
Mm. Yeah. I will say for the more modern Eric, by the way, that's great. Eric Warner in the chat. Also, thanks for your question. He's going to be there on the 17th. Look forward to seeing you on the 17th. And again, that's another great point. On the 17th, we can continue these conversations. I'm looking forward to it. I will say at the junior high school, one of the girls, I forget her name, but she was pretty strong. She was pretty stout and solid. And apparently she was quite strong competing on the national level in judo at the junior high school. She was like really, really high ranked. And she had a lot of respect around the school. Nobody messed with her. All
Oh,
the boys gave her a bit of a, they're like, oh, and they would whisper at her, oh yeah, yeah, she's
even
really
even
strong.
today, even today, grammar school kids are recognized and recruited to go to certain high schools. They'll go to their parents. It doesn't make the press, and it's not widely known. But these schools, usually private schools or even public schools that are noted for their sports programs, for their judo programs, they'll go to the parents and say, you get an address in our
Mm,
neighborhood if it's a public school, but if it's a private school, it doesn't matter where they're from. So we will give you scholarship at, you're talking about elementary school kids. All of
yeah.
a sudden, the parents go, hey, there's a chance for my child to become,
It does happen in families a lot because I know their family is all in combat sports. Like the father
yeah,
does combat sports, the mother does combat sports, the two sisters both do combat sports that the junior high school level and high school. Now they're university age, so I'm sure they're still doing it. But I remember the older sister was like won the whatever the Tokyo Prefecture like award or something for her
yeah.
age group, and the younger
Well, that's
sister
what we'll
was
see.
quite
We'll
good
see.
at boxing. It was quite
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. Well, at the end of on the 17th on Sunday, we'll see the ladies in Tokyo competing to go up to the national level, and they'll have seeds inside that organization from semi-pro judo teams, from the national police, uh, and then just people who brought their gi to go compete someplace, and they
I'll be
come
on the
from
lookout to see if any of my former students are there. I'll be looking. Is that my
yeah.
student? Is that my student? But all right. Thank you again, Mr. Gatling. Wonderful, wonderful talk. I am gonna have to. We're about almost 15 minutes over time. Thank you
Uh,
so much for being patient with us. Thank you for the audience for joining us. Thank you, Amani, for being patient. I know you've got things that you have to get done. Uh, Everyone, lovely, lovely talk. We're going to get this up on YouTube soon, and we'll see everyone on the 17th and see some live in-person judo. Maybe we'll convince Lance if I get a couple highballs in him, maybe we'll convince him to go down there on the stage and start competing against people.
That's one of the reasons I quit drinking.
Darn. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Bye now. Thank you.
FadTech's IT support and mobile internet service helps make events like this one possible. Thank you.